Now it's a whole new round.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Reference Point. I'm your host, Dave Cokerhook. Actually, welcome back, because this is the second show of two in a conversation with Ruben Valles Jr., who is running for president in 2020. And we had a wonderful conversation with him in the first show. We'll touch a little bit on that, and we're going to dig into some more things. Ruben, welcome back to Reference Point.
Thank you.
Appreciate the fact that you stuck around to do this. And just to kind of as a little, for maybe some of the folks who are tuning in now didn't necessarily see our first episode, you're running for president in 2020. Yes. This is not a joke. This is a for real thing.
Yes.
Why are you doing this?
Because the people deserve a leader that's going to care for them. They deserve somebody who's going to listen to their wants, listen to their desires, and really take that into consideration and not try to push an agenda, a political agenda, regardless of what party you're affiliated with. Again, because we're all in this boat together. Mm-hmm. So if we don't act as a unit and progress further together as just human beings, mm-hmm. then we're going to be doomed to repeat the same negative, perpetual lifestyles that we've seen in the past.
Got it. And you're a native Californian. You were born here in the Silicon Valley area, grew up here, went to elementary school, high school. You got some university credits. A couple of BAs that you've got, and other ones that you're working on. And you were in the military, right?
Yes.
And you served where?
Over in Iraq, Ramadi.
For
just
in
about
the Marines, right?
In the Marines, yeah. Just around a 6-8 month term.
But you were in for 4 years?
Just about 4 years, just right under. I ended up getting out on a medical discharge, so yeah.
Okay, well, very cool, good. And we talked at the last show about the fact that you are, in essence, you're running for president, what that takes, essentially. We're not going to cover all that area again. One question I want to ask you before we start diving into some of these other things. The President of the United States is going to interact with leaders in other countries. That's part of the job.
Right.
Okay. So what do you see as your strengths in dealing with heads of state from other countries?
Well, for one, confidence and sympathy and empathy and open-mindedness. Because if you're going to be a leader of a free world, of a free nation, and especially the United States, you need to take into consideration the cultural and social differences and values each nation has. Mm-hmm. So you can't just go over there and hope to strike a deal because it's just going to benefit your nation. You have to consider all the macro and micro levels of influences you can have.
There are implications behind things like that, though. You've got your national security advisor people, you've got your economic advisory things, your trade advisory people, your all these things, okay? And I wonder, I think about that every now and again. How do you balance and juggle those different things, especially when like yourself, and I'm going to go into this in a minute, but you have a perspective. There are certain things that you see that you want to have a positive impact on, and when you're being, but at the same time, you need to listen to your advisors.
Yes.
Okay. So how do you balance that?
Again, it comes down to open-mindedness and being open to different perspectives. Again, because you can all have the same goal, but everybody who brings something valuable to the table. So if the end goal is the same, it really comes down to collaborating and realizing how your strategies and tactics go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. Again, regardless of your party affiliation, it's the end goal, and it's what we're aiming for. So you really have to work on the better communication and not trying to point the finger, play the blame game.
Gotcha. Okay, so I want to go into something you have on your website. I think it's on your website. I know you emailed a copy to me. Some information that's sort of like your perspective as to why you're doing this. And one of the things you say here, part of your objective is to bring education, immigration, jobs, taxes, veterans, healthcare, environmental protection, and business corruption to the forefront of issues.
Yes.
So let's talk about that for a little bit. I mean, that's some pretty heavy-duty stuff. And are these things not at the forefront of issues today?
Well, I'm not going to say that they're not, but it's a matter of urgency to really press on finding a solution for those issues. And, there's a lot of candidates out there that go and say, oh, this is going to be something I'm going to push for. But when it actually comes down to getting the footwork done and putting in the time and effort, it's kind of put on the back burner. They take small steps into trying to achieve.
Why is that? I mean, is that because they're trying to position themselves to get reelected? Is it because their constituents are telling them it's not that big of a deal for me here in Podunk, Iowa. I mean, why is that?
I personally believe it comes down to the teamwork and the collaboration again. As I keep saying, collaboration is key. And when you try to push for better immigration, you obviously have two opposing ideas of how immigration should work. But as U.S. president, it should be your job to help bridge the gap between both those perspectives and be like, look, this is common ground. This is what we want. How can we approach it? And so that's just pretty much how I would approach it.
It seems to me that sometimes these things are an iterative process and not a get it all fixed in one fell swoop type of a thing.
Right.
Is that something that resonates with you? Do you see that as being true?
Yeah, I mean, well, the thing is, there's no simple solution for any of these problems. They're very complicated. And again, you have to pull on different expertise and different perspectives to really get a good idea of how these policies can have an effect negatively or in a positive manner on society.
Okay, cool. So one of the other things you say here, U.S. schools focus on, you would like to see U.S. schools refocus on emphasizing academics rather than attitudes and social agendas/standards. So what do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is actually we need to educate the children to be inspired to be better. And the way we do that is by presenting, as a teacher and as someone who teaches kids as well, you have to aspire to be better. And when you aspire to be better, you inspire those that look up to you. And so when we take into consideration our current educational system, we look at how we batch them. We batch them based on their age, their grades, and if they don't meet a certain requirement at a certain grade or at a certain age range, then they're labeled as something else.
Right.
And then they can be put behind everybody else. And what we really got to consider as educators is that everybody learns differently. Either you learn better through auditory lessons or through visual, more hands-on. So we really need to reshape our educational system to benefit the children and the next generation that learn differently. And so again, taking different steps and coming up with different strategies and tactics for it.
And you mentioned it, but we didn't talk about this the last show, but let's dig into it just for a quick second or two. You are an educator right now. You're a teacher at a local school at some level, and I don't remember the details, but enlighten us on that.
Well, I'm actually a site director. I run an after-school daycare.
Site director?
Yes,
okay.
Site director. I run an after-school daycare program.
Oh, okay.
So our program there is based on play-based learning. So we help the kids learn, but we make sure it's where they enjoy it, they interact with one another. So we help them with their socialization skills, their math, their English, their reading comprehension, stuff like that.
Got it. Okay. So I want to go back to this statement here about having the schools refocus on emphasizing academics rather than attitudes and social agendas. What do you mean by attitudes and social agendas?
Well, attitudes and social agendas, when it comes to attitudes, it's how they perceive themselves within their society and how they feel where they maybe should be given certain things or given leeway in their life. But if we concentrate on the academics side, we can tell them that we can expand their thinking and their perspectives by teaching them facts, scientific facts, going through history, going through historical social reforms and stuff of that sort. So we need to try to have them not concentrate so much on their social interactions and help them realize that it's a big part of their life, but it doesn't determine how they tackle objectives in life and how they learn.
Got it. Okay, cool. Another item that's on your prospectus here, you'd like to see, you say, American jobs are being outsourced for increased profit margin and reduced overhead cost, and that's like an area that is definitely of interest to you and trying to make some impact on that. Let's talk about jobs for a little bit, because that's one of the areas that is really, on a lot of people's minds. Some of the most recent information indicates that the economy here at the beginning of 2018 has done well in the last year. The job market is robust right now, especially here in Northern California. Other parts of the country, maybe not so much still. But how do you approach this question of the job market?
Well, we got to take into consideration our technological advancement from maybe 50, 30 years ago. We've come so far. And when it comes to job placements and making more jobs readily available for the American people, we got to look at how the job market is expanding and how different positions are opening up. So if you look at like labor jobs, you know, a lot of labor jobs can end up going, you know, becoming extinct, if you will, primarily because of technology. There are certain things that robots can do that are considered to be more efficient than what a human can do. But in that whole realm of robots taking over and doing a lot of the groundwork for the people, you get coding, you get software that needs to be, you know, written, you get hardware that needs to be built. So you have a whole plethora of other job opportunities that can be opened up within the technological market.
You know, I saw something yesterday. I commented this to my wife. We were watching, I think it was 60 Minutes, and there was a commercial on there by a one of these companies that does taxes, right? And then the byline is that something along the lines of the biggest employer in the United States are people that work for themselves. So that there are more people, more entrepreneurial people, people who are working, you know, have started a business of some way, shape, or form. So they're really working for themselves, and that's like, and I've seen this before. I've done some research and had a couple other shows that have talked about that kind of a thing. The small business is where it's at, but certain things like the tax code is not necessarily friendly to small business. It's friendly to the big business guys who are trying to, because they have a gazillions of dollars and they're trying to get it back into the U.S. or you're giving them breaks and blah, blah, blah. But it's hard for an independent business person to be able to get things done, especially if you're trying to qualify for lending and whatnot. So we're getting into a whole other area. But let's talk about, from a jobs perspective, what do you see, how entrepreneurialism, how does that fit into the picture for you?
Well, with entrepreneurialism, it fits into picture in a really important way because, again, it's ingenuity and creativity from a specific individual, and that influences the rest of the market, and also just job placement. It opens up so many avenues in which you can create newer jobs for people from a specific company. So with entrepreneurs, it's really important because they can go and get into small niche community areas that maybe a bigger company can't. They can meet the needs of a certain area. So unlike a bigger corporation, they already have their name, their brand, and you know, X amount of items or surplus or whatever it may be. With the entrepreneurs, they can come up with something new and creative that a bigger company may not have thought of. And that can be the tipping point into changing the whole game within the job industry. I mean, like I said, it can create whole new jobs and create a whole new level of technology. I
agree with that. And one of the things that you and I talked about, I mentioned a book to you called The Fourth Industrial Revolution. One of the things he talks about in that book is 3D printing. And I've been following and watching that whole technology, and they are now using metal powders as the substrate to print things. And so when you talk about an industry that's ripe for change, look at the service industry. The guy that you know, if you got to take your, you know, you have a problem, a plumbing fixture breaks at house, you got to go down to Lowe's and see if you can get the right one, or call a plumber and he doesn't have it, he has to go. You could actually create those things on site. That opens up a tremendous amount of opportunity for entrepreneurialism in that kind of arena. But all right, cool. I like your thoughts on that. Let's go into another topic. Immigration is a real big one. It's a hot button item, and it's been a hot button item in U.S. politics now for going on, I don't know, since God was a boy, I think. It's just ridiculous. But one of the things that I have observed is that the responsibility for immigration policy rests with Congress. And Congress has seemed to just be kicking the can down the road to the next Congress and the next Congress and the next Congress, because they don't want to deal with it because it's such a complicated issue. What are your thoughts regarding the immigration policy?
With immigration, I do agree it is complicated. There's no doubt about that. But we must approach our immigration policy from a moral and ethical standpoint, and not so much of, no, we need to worry just about America and we need to stop immigrants from coming in. Because at the same time, when you do that, you're also hindering our social, our cultural, economical, and technological advancements. Again, as I mentioned earlier in our first part of the show, is that we are so much more interconnected now. And if we were to put a wall up, like what is supposedly supposed to be happening, you cut yourself off from different perspectives and from growth. And there's different people of different nationalities, cultures, and social backgrounds that are coming to this nation because they see the value. They see the opportunity. And you know, as I've told some people, the American dream's not dead. It's there. We just have to take it back. And if we don't allow people to come in from other nations, we don't gain perspective.
So the president doesn't make policy in that regard. Immigration policy, immigration law is not created by the president. The president has to enforce it or do whatever, okay? And then you get into the questions of, if this is a situation, what are the options for addressing that? And the current administration has a viewpoint on those things that are a challenge that they're looking to try to. So given, if it's a true statement that the law, whatever the immigration law is created by Congress, what might you be looking at as president to try to get resolved? I mean,
well, let's
how
look
would
at
you go about that?
Well, let's look at the current thing that's going on right now that tends to be a hot button is DACA, the DREAM Act. Now, children from, let's just say, Mexico or from any other nation for that matter that come over, when they're brought over as children, you know, they're given the security and the chance to lead a fulfilling life, get an education, you know, to better their next generation of children that are going to be coming up. And now to take away DACA and take away that child's rights to a better future, to me, that's immoral.
But there isn't a legal structure in place that actually allows that to take place? I know that the previous administration had some sort of executive order, which I had heard may or may not fit in with what it actually the courts would say. But isn't the problem not so much that I think we're all agree that that should be something that the young people who were here, you know, the dreamers, should be able to. Why can't they stay? Right. But that's a law problem. How do you as president make sure, or how do you influence to try to get those people responsible for writing the laws to actually write a law that makes sense?
Get them to see the benefits of having immigration be consistent, and not to where it's going to be, you're going to have an influx of immigration or a huge decrease in immigration. They need to see the benefits of bringing in different cultures. And that's what we need to appeal to. And it's kind of like you could take the horse to the water, but you can't force it to drink. So we're kind of in that scenario. And at this point in time, all we can do is really point out the benefits, the social and the cultural and technological benefits of allowing immigration to occur.
Got it. Cool. So let's talk a little bit about the economy. The economy is an interesting thing. We came through that massive recessionary activity in, was it 2009, I guess it was, something like that, when the market crashed and Goldman Sachs went away and all that sort of stuff. And it's taken us a bit of a while to come out of that. The U.S. seems to be doing okay, better than Europe right now in terms of economic growth. But and again, the president doesn't necessarily make economic law, economic policy. He can influence it, and certainly his cabinet, you know, will have a large impact on that. But what are your perspectives from when you look at economics and the economy as to things that you think need to be considered and need to be addressed?
Well, for one, we need to help reestablish our economical classes, because the upper class can't exist without the middle class, and the middle class can't exist without the lower class. And the reason why I say that is because you have to, again, aspire to move up economically. And when you do that, you build that next class up. And then if you want to get up into the higher economic class, then obviously you get an education, you go and you take the steps necessary to be able to make that higher income. What we need to do is make it financially feasible and reachable for all classes, specifically more for the lower class and the middle class. We can't allow our economics, the divide between both classes, to be so wide, because then how are you going to be inspired or feel the need to move up economically if you find yourself barely making minimum wage, you know, working in X amount of years in a certain job, and getting passed up on promotions or having to try to meet certain criteria.
You see that type of a thing that you described in a lot of other countries that have a huge disparity. And it seems that here in the U.S. that disparity is growing. And it's interesting given the fact that the economic opportunity is so strong here, you would think that it should foster a lot of growth in that middle class, but that middle class has been being squeezed. Part of it is tax policy. Part of it is economic policy. Part of it is the transition of types of work, like you were talking about earlier. Okay, a lot of people who may have been working in an industry that is now heavily automated, they have to get retrained. They have to think about it. They have to do something else to be able to maintain. Otherwise, they just have to rely on whatever the monies they can get for because they're not working. Okay, cool. Got that. Let's talk about defense.
Okay. Well, with defense, go ahead.
Right now, I mean, we look at what's going on across the planet. There's all sorts of crazy things going on.
Yeah.
You know, in Europe, you got the Crimea situation and what's going on with the Russians and the Ukrainians, right? You've got the Middle East with what's going on there with Syria and whatnot. You've got even within Iraq, where you've got the Iraqis and the Kurds, you know, and then you got the Koreans, and you got Venezuela. It's like there's a lot of weird stuff going on right now.
Yeah.
And so from a defense posture perspective, the United States needs to do something. Does it take a lead role? Does it abdicate? Does it entrench and fall back, kind of like they wanted us to do, you know, in World War I, World War II? More like, let's take care of ourselves here and let the rest of these guys do whatever they're going to do. What do we have to do from that perspective, from a national defense perspective?
Well, I think we need to consider where we currently have our forces. We have forces placed in certain areas around the world that would help prevent any kind of hostile acts, any kind of hostile approach on any other foreign nation. And as of right now, like with Trump wanting to bolster our forces, I find that unneeded because when you bolster your forces, other neighboring nations can take that as a sign of something to happen. Like, why are you bolstering our forces? And you know, the argument to that is that our military force is smaller than what it was during World War II. But World War II, we're fighting a Nazi regime. We're fighting a huge regime, a whole entire country.
Two of them, actually, because they're Japanese, too.
Yes, yes. So, therefore, it made sense to have a huge number of forces, a huge number of ships, airplanes, ammunition being created, weapons. But in today's time, with how technologically advanced we are, you could simply push a button. And with that being in mind, we have to consider the fact that we don't have to have troops on ground.
Don't boots on the ground help to potentially create a sense that we're actually not here to cause you problems? We're trying to be here to help you out because you've got a problem here going on, and these, you know, Faction A is shooting at Faction B, and we're staying in the middle and keeping you guys from killing each other. I mean, isn't that part of the role?
It is, but when you reach a certain, I don't want to give a specific number, but when you hit a certain number of troops on the ground, what can that be looked at? That can be looked at more as a preemptive invasion or something of, no, we're going to try to stake a claim here.
Got it.
You know, so it's
like what the Russians did in Crimea. Okay,
yes,
that makes sense.
So if we're going to have troops there to protect other cultures and other nations from other terrorist organizations, anybody who wishes to do harm or kill people, you keep the forces within a reasonable size. And the whole point is that when you have boots on ground, you also have to worry about your cultural interactions. I recall when we were in Iraq, we'd have some of our commanding officers go and talk between the Shiites and the Sunnis to get both tribes to really try to see eye to eye and be like, look, you need to stop fighting each other. You know, you both in certain areas want the same thing, but yet the way you approach it are completely different. And so that's the whole point of also having troops out there, is to act as the bridge between, you know, the parties.
What about cybersecurity? Yeah, let's just say that, because you know you hear about these hackings. We don't know, but we've heard that the U.S. has done certain things in places, and the Russians have done it, and the Koreans have done this, and blah blah blah. So And the reality is that the technology exists to be able to do things that are, to plant malware, to do stuff like that, which can create all kinds of problems. And are we putting enough energy and effort into that arena, in your opinion?
I don't think we are. I think we are, as the United States, we're a little behind the cybersecurity curve here. I think that's why we're facing quite a few situations to where we say, oh, China, hacked into our systems or hacked into the Pentagon or something of that sort. So I think we need to get ahead on that curve. And what we need to do is not just worry about our own cybersecurity within our nation, but also look at a global scale. Communicate and build a system to where there's multiple checks and balances or checkpoints where information is put through, to where you can actually have factual information and other information that's not so reliable easily picked out between neighboring nations and have it filtered to where it needs to go.
Cool. So we have maybe a minute and 30 seconds left in this second show, and so I want to give the last minute over to you and tell the people who are watching. And by the way, don't forget, folks, info@referencepointtv.com. That's our email address. Send in your queries. We'll get it to Ruben. Tell us why should the people support you for president?
For one, I'm determined. Two, I have my heart in this, and there's no other reason behind it. It's not for the fame. It's not for the money. It's not to go and put my family name in a position to where they can be set for life. It's about standing up and doing what's right. And when I took that oath and I stepped on those yellow footprints, MCRD San Diego, like I said, that oath is to my heart. And I mean it for everybody. And I mean, it's as simple as not even for just running as president, but it's also just doing the right thing. As Aristotle would say, the virtue ethics. I really hold on to those. And it's about doing the right thing. And the reason why I really believe the American people can rally behind me is because I will not let them down. I will not put up a facade. I won't say one thing and turn my back and do another. As a Marine, when I give my word, that's my word, and that's what I'm going to do.
Great. Ruben, thank you so much for joining us here at Reference Point. I really appreciate that. I wish you well in your efforts. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. And reach out if you want to learn more about Ruben, learn more about our political system, and realize that there are things that you can do to make a significant change if you support the right people. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time on Reference Point.